You're listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. From our studios come special guests and netball commentary, exclusively on YouTube.
Welcome, listeners, to another edition of the 3 Feet Radio Show. Joining me in the studio is my co-host, Luke Herbert. G'day, Luke.
G'day, Ben, and how are you doing today?
Yeah, very well, and I must say I'm very excited to be talking to our special guest today, considering how close we are to the 2015 Netball World Cup.
Oh, we're getting closer each sleep, and I'm getting more excited about it too. There's really 2 international events on the netball calendar that I get really excited about. The Commonwealth Games and the Netball World Cup is the second one, and I give them a fairly equal billing, so why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest, Ben?
It's a good morning to Marne Fechner, the Chief Executive Officer of Netball World Cup 2015. Hi, Marne. How are you?
Great, Ben. Thank you very much for having me on. It's very exciting.
I bet it is. Just to get things started here, first of all, could you tell us a bit about yourself? What were you up to prior to coming on board with Netball World Cup?
Before taking up the role of Chief Executive with Netball World Cup, I was the Head of Commercial with Netball Australia. So that role involved everything from sponsorship to events, licensing, a whole range of different really interesting things, and was fortunate in that role to be part of the bidding process for Sydney Netball World Cup 2015, which then I suppose led to a bit of excitement and passion to be part of the whole journey and apply for this role. So very excited to be here and love the role that I had before with Netball Australia.
All right, we're going to jump a little ahead in the program because you mentioned the bidding, and I think it's a good way to move into one of the questions that Ben and I were pondering off air. Is the bidding process used to determine which city will host a Netball World Cup, similar to what is used for the Olympics and other international sporting events?
I think that generally speaking, all bidding processes are fairly similar. I think the major distinction between Netball World Cup and events like the Olympics is probably the amount of money that is spent on the process. Netball, in comparison to the Olympics, is probably not as wealthy and lacking a lot of resources. And we also like to internationally invest resources that we do have around international development. So, yes, there is a bidding process, and that starts pretty much effectively immediately after a World Cup, that the International Netball Federation will go out to all of its member countries, 4 member countries, and ask who would like to put their hand up to host the event. And there's a formal process that you go through. In Netball Australia's case, we worked on a bid document that was submitted to the International Federation, and that was followed up by a visit from a bid delegation that was appointed by the International Netball Federation, which consisted of board members and independent representation as well, that travelled to each of the countries that was bidding in our instance. That was Netball England with an England bid and a Netball Australia with an Australia bid. And they evaluated our bid. They got to have a look at the facilities. They did all of those types of things, and then went away and made a recommendation to the international board as to who would be in their opinion, the most appropriate host for 2015. So each 4 years there's a fairly similar cycle in terms of that, and the board's always looking at ways in which they can streamline and improve, have more input from external bodies, but really try and minimise the cost associated with the bid processes so that more money is invested in the sport.
So obviously, Marne, the top 6 countries qualify, but the qualification process kicks off this week with the European zone in Wales. Could you explain that whole process to us? Because there's been a lot of people that have asked me, and probably even asked you too, they don't understand how the qualification process works.
Sure, Ben. Look, the 16 teams that compete, we might start there, the 16 teams that will compete in Netball World Cup in 2015. And given that we're a Netball World Cup and the International Federation has, in the last decade introduced a ranking system, there is, I suppose, can create some confusion in the marketplace in relation to how teams qualify for events such as the Netball World Cup. So in our instance, on the 1st of July, the International Federation will release its updated rankings, and the top 6 teams, which will include Australia, will qualify automatically for the Netball World Cup. And then to make sure that that our event is truly representative of the globe, 2 teams from each of the International Federation's 5 regions will qualify through a regional qualifying event to compete in the Netball World Cup. And those qualifying, so the regions are Europe, Americas, Africa, Asia and Oceania. And over the next couple of months, I think between this weekend and September, each of those 5 regions will host a qualifying event, and 2 teams from each of those regions will qualify for Netball World Cup. So that's how we get to our 16 teams.
And while we're dealing with the teams, the one thing that Ben and I have discussed quite a bit off air, and not just in preparation for this show, we've discussed it, over, I think, quite a period of time, is how come there's no sort of second division and or plate final, given the gap between the top 6 or even the top 4 ranked nations and the other sides at the Netball World Cup?
Look, it's definitely something that the International Fed and the International Board has discussed. Probably 4 years ago, the International Board established a commercial work group to look at all of these types of issues in terms of how do we keep improving the standard of netball globally, so that when you've got 16 teams that come together for a Netball World Cup, that there's really robust competition. And the reality is for netball is a lack of financial resources limits the opportunity for teams from, say, an African region to travel to the Americas region or the Asian region or any region outside their own to participate in internationally recognised test matches that help their rankings. So we've spoken to all of the international member countries, and there's an overwhelming feeling that if they come to Netball World Cup, they actually want to compete for Netball World Cup. And although they recognise that event has been dominated across the decades by Australia and New Zealand, they still it's very important for them to be invited to participate in the Netball World Cup, and as a result, whilst other trophies are nice to have, they still aspire, I suppose, to winning the Netball World Cup. What we are looking at doing in 2015 for the first time, though, is introducing an invitational event. So as well as the Netball World Cup, which will have our 16 teams, we're looking at an invitational event wrapped around Netball World Cup for another 6 to 8 nations potentially to come to Sydney, and introducing a different type of trophy for that event. And, over time, I think that over the years, I suggest that for the next World Cup, that the board will, revisit this idea of having a trophy potentially for the bottom 8 teams or those types of things. But the draw would have to change, not the draw, but the event format would need to change to actually be able to consider that type of introduction of a second-tier trophy.
I believe also, Marne, you've got Kath Tetley on board helping with fan engagement and legacy. What sort of things is she doing, and what have you been doing yourself to look into the sort of things you can tie in from Sydney having hosted the Netball World Championships 24 years ago next year in 1991 into 2015?
Well, Kath's doing a brilliant job in terms of fan engagement. We recognise that now, which is no surprise to anyone, that sport is very much moved beyond just what's happening on the court, and fans that come to events like Netball World Cup or the ANZ Championship or one of our Constellation Cup matches is not only expecting to be entertained by what's on the court and our brilliant teams playing high-class netball, they also want to be engaged by, what's happening in the seating bowl. So from a fan engagement perspective, we're really looking at everyone's experience for our international and interstate guests when they arrive in Sydney. What do they feel? What do they experience around netball? How are they looked after? How visible is Netball World Cup within the Sydney marketplace? What's their train trip out to Sydney Olympic Park like? And then when they get into Sydney Olympic Park, How are they interacting with other fans? What can they do within the park that relates to netball? So Fan Fest is something that's going to be a new addition to Netball World Cup, and that's going to be a dedicated area where people will be able to step away from the court action, have a break, get something to eat, and have a chat to other like-minded fans, participate in our sponsor activity, and take a look at our heritage and our historical displays, a whole range of different things that will be happening within the park, so that not only the event itself, but the experience that they have with the event makes it something that they'll remember for years to come and talk about and make them want to go to future events. In terms of legacy, part of the Netball Australia's bid in relation to legacy was very much around our sport and the development of our sport within Australia and into Asia, because Australia sits within the Asian region, but then also more broadly looking at international development. So there's a considerable amount of funding that's being invested in international development of fundamentals such as coaching and umpiring within the Asian region, which pretty much are the backbone to netball and its growth and development within countries within Asia. And then closer to home, we're looking at a lot of, and I suppose from a legacy perspective, our event and Netball World Cup finishes up, we finish on the pretty much we'll be wrapping things up towards the end of 2015, and then we pack up and we go home, and it was a nice thing to have. But what we want to make sure in terms of the things that we're doing in Australia that for years to come will change the face of netball. And so we're working very closely with Netball Australia in spaces such as volunteers and our workforce capacity, and making sure that volunteerism is something that continues to grow for netball, and we have a new group of volunteers coming through. Because sport doesn't survive without that group of people. We're doing a lot of work with schools and making sure that netball remains a stalwart within school programs, and then also utilising Netball World Cup to promote our One Netball program. So that's all about inclusion and making sure that all Australians have an opportunity to engage in netball, and World Cup is a brilliant way to profile that, because we have representation from every region across the globe. So people will be able to look at Netball World Cup and know that there's a place for them within netball.
Speaking of going to games, here's a question that I'd like to put to you. Has the World Cup been devalued with the introduction of the Constellation Cup that is played between the Australian Diamonds and the New Zealand Silver Ferns?
Oh, the Constellation Cup is an amazing event. It's just, I suppose it's netball's version of the Bledisloe Cup, and it's really, really exciting. So I don't think in any way, shape or form that it's devalued events such as the World Cup. The reality is that the World Cup is the pinnacle for netball that only happens every 4 years, and we're really lucky to be able to see the Constellation Cup every year in Australia and New Zealand. I think that overwhelmingly events like the Constellation Cup, like the ANZ Championship, continue to build the brand of netball and make sure that our fans have an opportunity to see high-class net every year. And in relation to Netball World Cup, as I think Ben mentioned before, it's been a long time, 24 years since we've had the Netball World Cup in Australia, and fortunately we've had things like Constellation Cup here to continue to develop our fan base. So I think it's really, really exciting for netball to have events like the Constellation Cup, and for Australian fans and New Zealand fans, because they are on our doorstep and fans around the world. The Netball World Cup in 2015 is going to be an amazing event, not only for the players but for netball fans and sporting fans around the country, because if past Commonwealth Games and past World Cup events are anything to go by, they always create an amazing moment for that gold medal game and some amazing competition across the 10 days of the tournament. So we're totally excited to have all of the different netball events here in Australia in 2015.
Marnie, you were talking about the gold medal game. It's been interesting because traditionally we've seen the Australian Diamonds and the New Zealand Silver Ferns not meet until the final. But now it looks like it's going to be Australia will play New Zealand earlier in pool play in 2015. What's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, no, you're correct, Ben. Australia and New Zealand will be in the same initial pool, so we will see Australia and New Zealand play early in the first 4 days of the 10-day tournament. The rationale around the changes to the event format, which have resulted in us seeing Australia play New Zealand, was to really look at providing more closely teams that, I suppose, in terms of a nutshell, was to provide a better product for our broadcasters and for our fans. So more closely matched games across the 10 days of the tournament, an opportunity for us to see the likes of Australia and New Zealand before the gold medal game, if they do in fact end up playing each other in the gold medal game, an opportunity for Australia to play, for our fans to see if the Diamonds take on Jamaica and England. And I think that in terms of what the changes to events has made, it's made it a much more robust competition. So if the Diamonds do in fact win, and I'm sure that there's hundreds of thousands of fans out there that want the Diamonds to retain the World Cup trophy, it means that they will have faced the toughest opposition in winning that trophy. So trying to maximise a really good mix of great competition, high-profile matches, and opportunities for us to really put on an event in a very sophisticated sports market that meets the needs of all of our constituent groups.
And while we're talking about broadcasting, are you closer or close to sorting out broadcast arrangements?
We are, and really we'll be very excited to have that done over the next month or two. In fact, all of our media partnerships will be coming and be able to be announced within the next couple of months. And I think it will be really exciting for, particularly for Australian fans. We've still got work to do internationally in terms of the sale and distribution of Netball World Cup internationally, but that will follow. So things are really positive. It's very exciting. Obviously, I can't disclose anything, but we're really pleased with the way that the discussions are progressing at the moment. And at the end of the day, I think that our fans will be very excited as well.
Have you also been negotiating with other media outlets to become a media partner? I know the Daily Telegraph and other News Limited papers over the years have been very supportive of netball.
Yeah, look, we're looking at all of our media rights, and that includes everything from radio to television to digital, print, all of the different media formats. We're working really closely with Twitter Australia, which in terms of Karen Stocks, the CEO of Twitter Australia, has been a fantastic supporter of netball and a massive fan, and so all of the different mechanisms that Netball World Cup can tap into to engage and to inform the public and our fans is really important. And so yes, stay tuned. There'll be a number of partners that will be released, and they're very, the positive note is that they're all really excited to be working with us, which is great.
And you mentioned volunteers earlier. Many of our listeners are not just passionate netball fans, but also hold various roles at all levels of netball. For those that may be interested in volunteering at the Netball World Cup in 2015, could you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, you're right. We're like any sporting event, and Cricket World Cup and Asian Football Cup that are also on the calendar during 2015. Netball World Cup will require an excited and energetic group of volunteers to make the event come alive in 2015. There is an opportunity. The best way that people that are interested in volunteering is to sign up to our electronic newsletter called Centre Circle, and you can do that through the Netball World Cup website to keep up to date of all announcements in relation to Netball World Cup, whether that be fan packages or call for volunteers. But there will be our initial calls for volunteers will be happening across July and August this year, so in terms of what fans or what potential volunteers need to do is really just keep an eye on the website and sign up for Centre Circle, and they'll be the first to know what's happening in relation to our call for volunteers. We're a 10-day event, so we'll be looking at people that can make a commitment across the 10 days, and there'll be various types of roles, from sports-specific volunteer roles through to general volunteer roles that will be involved in and around Allphones Arena, which is our main competition venue, and the new Netball Central that's being built, but also Fan Fest and the broader Sydney Olympic Park. So we're looking to recruit around 500 volunteers, and I don't think you'll have any problems in doing that, because we've got a brilliant netball population that wants to be involved.
You mentioned fan packages. I believe they went on sale within the last week or so, Marnie.
They did indeed, Ben. It's been a very exciting build-up to the launch of fan packages. We've been through a process of appointing official travel agents, or OTAs, around the world, and we've got 3 in New Zealand, 2 in Australia, and 1 based in England that will service the European market. They have gone on sale. They went on sale last week, and there's a range of fan package offerings that are available. We know that the response to those has been unprecedented, which is very exciting for the event. And it means that, obviously we've got a lot of fantastic fans out there that want to be the first to secure their seats for Netball World Cup in 2015. But also the important thing, I think, about fan packages, and we realise that they mightn't be for everyone, is that the fan packages involve bundles of tickets, event experiences. They come in all different shapes and sizes. Some include accommodation and travel, others don't, so that they're pretty much, hopefully, and we're always happy to receive feedback, but there'll be a package for everyone. And for those that don't want to purchase a package, individual session tickets will go on sale early in 2015, so people can access tickets through that process as well.
And are you able to tell us which outlet will be selling the tickets that aren't sold through travel packages?
Oh, sure. So Ticketek is our ticketing agency, and they'll be the group that'll be selling individual session tickets when they do go on sale. I think the big message for fans is, if they want to secure the seat in the seating category that they want, and make sure that they've got a seat for that gold medal game, fan packages are a good option to consider. But there will be individual session tickets available come early 2015, but they may not be in all the seating categories.
Have you had any sort of tour companies sort of show any interest at all, Marnie? I know back in 2007 in New Zealand, and also in 2011 in Singapore, there were companies like Gulliver's, etc., who sort of were able to put packages together for fans, and they were like one big tour group, and you could tell who they were because they had different T-shirts and all that sort of paraphernalia as well.
Yeah. They're our official travel agents. So and they are pretty much, they're doing exactly what you said, Ben. So they'll be so in Australia it's Events Worldwide and STA Travel, and in New Zealand it's Willamette, House of Travel, and Sport by BCD, and in the UK it's CSE. So those companies are doing exactly that. They travel as a group. They organise in terms of the types of ticket offerings. There's an opening weekend bundle, there's a closing weekend bundle, and there's a follow your team bundle. And there'll be merchandise sales, and we're going to be running two amazing events at each of the weekends. The opening weekend will be celebrating Netball World Cup legends and the competition across since 1963. And then on the final day of Netball World Cup, we'll be having a massive grand final brunch. And so they're really exciting events. We can't wait. We're probably looking at around 1,500 people at each of those events, so not small. And but what it will offer is an amazing experience and build up to things like the final day and the medal games of Netball World Cup.
And now, listeners, what a lot of people may not know is that Marnie and I actually have worked together at different times over the last couple of years. And I believe you were quite the player yourself when you used to play, Marnie. I saw a photo of you in your Australian tracksuit and a history book when I was doing some research for Kate Palmer the other day.
Ben, you've let the cat out of the bag. No, I was a player, and in 1991 I was a young aspiring Australian 21 and under player, and so quite a privilege for me to be sitting in the seat that I am now as CEO of Netball World Cup. Never thought back then, as I was, closing my eyes when Australia were on in extra time, and willing them to get over the line and win the World Cup. But look, I think there are many better players than I. I had enjoyed my time playing netball. I loved it, and really have been very fortunate to be able to work in a sport that I'm so passionate about. And share your passion, Ben, in terms of the sport and what it can be.
All right, Marnie, thanks very much for the chat, and it's onwards and upwards towards the Netball World Cup 2015.
Looking forward to seeing everyone in Sydney.
You've been listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. Tune in next time for more special guests and netball commentary exclusively on YouTube.